13 incubatees in various stages of their growth, offering them laboratory and co-working spaces, technical mentorship, facilitation of funding for their projects, and so on and so forth. Today's meeting, it is conceptualized to understand one of the very important aspects of healthcare, that is diagnostic testing. As we all know, the global number of COVID confirmed cases are nearing 50 lakhs. In India itself, we have crossed 1,20,000 cases, while in Gujarat, it has gone above 13,000. If you look at ICMR's portal, it has been updating daily how many testings have been done, what is the status, and how many samples are being tested every day. So till today 9 a.m., there have been 27,19,434 samples tested, and in last 24 hours, more than 1 lakh samples have been tested. So the testing of samples is now ramped up and is going at a pace to keep pace with the spread. So diagnostic testing is thus become a critical aspect of timely testing and healthcare support for survival or recovery of the patients. So today we have who will share their insights on COVID-19 pandemic, challenges and opportunities in diagnostic testing. So I take this opportunity to briefly introduce our 4 panelists today. So we have Dr. Gaurang Shah, who is Professor and Head of the PharmD and MPharm at LM College of Pharmacy. He is a member of Executive Committee as well as mentor of AIC-LMCP Foundation and has more than 26 years of teaching, industry and R&D experience in pharma field. So his areas of research interest and expertise include in vivo and in vitro preclinical pharmacology, especially in inflammatory disorders, gastrointestinal disorders, hematological disorders, and respiratory disorders. So he is an alumni of LM College of Pharmacy and has many publications, presentations to his credit. He has supervised more than 70 masters and 10 PhD scholars and has been very active in research area around this particular sector. The second panelist we have is Dr. Amit Gupta, who is CEO of Airmed Pathology Private Limited. He is a radiologist by background from BG Medical College. He did his MD. He has also done his MBA from ISB Hyderabad, and he has been a serial entrepreneur and having many ventures to his credit. So he started with started as head of radiology at Indira Gandhi Hospital in Maldives, and then he started outsourcing of radiology and pathology services in one of the reputed hospitals in Bapnagar. He then established Mitsubishi Healthcare Private Limited, followed by Acuvio Diagnostics Private Limited. After that, he also again started Mitsubishi Path Labs, and currently he is the CEO of Airmed Pathology Private Limited, which is actually a B2C pathology lab business. He is also a mentor at AIC-LMCP Foundation's mentor board. The third expert is Dr. Sandeep Shah, who is the Executive Director at Newberg Diagnostics. He is MD Pathology and Bacteriology, and he has founded the Supratech Micropath Lab, which is one of the biggest labs in Ahmedabad. He is gold medalist from BJ Medical College, and he is also an associate of College of American Pathologists, USA. He also set up country's finest genomic testing centers in Ahmedabad. Our fourth panelist is Dr. Parthiv Mehta, who is Senior Consultant Pulmonologist and Intensivist. Currently, he is the Technical Advisor for Pulmonary Critical Care in state-level COVID management team. He is also Honorary Pulmonologist to His Excellency Governor of Gujarat, Honorary Chief Pulmonary of Intensive Care at UN Mehta Institute of Cardiology, He is also Honorary Chief Interventional Pulmonology, Gujarat Cancer and Research Institute, and he is a Medical Director at Mission Life India as well as Central United Hospital, Odav in Ahmedabad. So, with this panel of experts, we would like to start understanding or getting their insights into this very important aspect of diagnostic testing in COVID-19. So, to start with, Dr. Gaurang, if we would like to understand what challenges are there for or what are different modalities of testing which are available and what are the challenges for developing a diagnostic test for such infectious diseases? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Samu. And very warm evening to all the participants. Basically, coronavirus, most of the things people know or hear, a lot of things are available on the net and that information are there. Certain things with respect to diagnostics, I'd like to give some brief introduction about what is happening in this area. Basically, the coronavirus is a derivative, which is derived from or which is very near the SARS virus which faced the infection in 2002. And
So can you hold the speaker closer? You are not audible.
hello,
Yeah.
am I audible now?
Yeah, better.
Okay. The coronavirus, which is presently seen as COVID-19, basically is tested by was rather the first case of this was identified on 7th December, and since then people have been working on diagnostics. People have been working on diagnostics of this. The first of all, the issues are the different possibility of the testings that are there. So before going into that, I would like to share my screen. Is it possible to share my screen?
So you will have a share screen icon there.
Yes, I'm good.
Yeah.
Basically, this is the SARS COVID virus 2. And if you look into the structure, it has very some of the structural proteins like S protein, C protein, amino protein, and the RNA genome, which is a positive RNA strand, which can directly work as an mRNA. Now, this testings, whatever diagnostic testings are there, this includes either the genome testing, the RNA genome testing, or for the presence of these proteins. And the third possibility is the finding out the presence of the antibodies to this protein. That is S protein antibodies or E protein antibodies or M protein antibodies or other protein antibodies. So these three options we have present, and the most common, most described test is the virus test, presence of virus, which includes two possibilities, either the genome possibility or it is the presence of the proteins. The genome testing is basically done by RT-PCR. That is, you are collecting the samples from the nasopharynx or the oral regions, and this virus are then taken out, their mRNA is extracted out, this mRNA is converted into DNA, and this DNA is then multiplied here. And this amplified DNA is then used for testing, determining whether it is the virus is present or not. Now that is a sure shot test, but only thing requirement is sufficient amount of RNA is there. Now this can be detected after 2 or 3 days of the infections of a person. Another possibility is measuring the viral antigens of proteins. Now this is a quick test. RT-PCR is a test which requires a lot of time, and one sample at a time can be analyzed. Whereas the viral antigens can be analyzed, say 100 samples a day in a one shot, can be analyzed using a fluorescence or other techniques. Only problem is these proteins cannot be amplified like DNA. It won't have amplification systems. So it may give negative results when actually the test cases are positive. And only after certain days of infections they become clinically observable. Another most commonly described now as an antibody test, and this antibody test is testing for presence of IgM and IgG antibodies. And IgM is detectable after 4 to 7 days of infections, and peak day is 14. IgG is detectable after 10 to 14 days and peaks at 28 days. And antibodies are not suitable for acute infections because you find the presence of this when almost the infection is in the final stage. Either it is recovering or the person is in a very bad shape.
Sure.
And just the last thing is, if you can see at this diagram, you can understand the virus load you can observe when the symptom starts, that is the days week 0. That is at the peak. At that time, antibodies present are very small. And the IgM antibodies then stop at second weeks, means the concentration drops down at second week. Whereas IgG antibodies continue to remain high.
Sure. So I think there are multiple targets which one can use as modality for detecting it. So with this, I move on to Dr. Parthiv. So you being a pulmonologist and you're directly handling the patients who are either positive or they are asymptomatic. So what are those typical challenges you face? I mean, you can also tell us what is the pathogenesis of this COVID, and also let us know what challenges you face if you don't get the diagnostic support in time.
Yes, a very good question. The reason being, I'm in the institute, but now I'm taking off my N95. The reason being, COVID has a wide spectrum of presentation. We know that nearly 20 to 25% remain asymptomatic in spite of them having COVID within the body. And the rest may start with mild symptoms. They may be having some of them who would present with like walking dead. Walking dead means they are the ones who have very severe disease. And if we measure their oximetry, pulse oximetry, measuring the saturation of oxygen, number of RBC or percentage of RBCs bringing blood to the tip of the finger would be as low as 40%, 50%, and they lose their life within 6 to 8 hours of their presentation on hospital or an ER. So there is a wide spectrum. Now the problem we as clinicians face is, number one, is it COVID or not? Number two, if it is not COVID, what else is it? So diagnostic dilemma is there because there is a good overlap on the symptoms, on the presenting symptoms. We have influenza, which is only very well prevalent here. We have H1N1, which is very well prevalent. We have many atypical bacterial pneumonias also, they would present the same. But since we are in a pandemic and we are in a new epidemic where we have an eye over the only and only COVID, we try to rule out or we try to confirm the presence of COVID. And that is where the diagnostic test has immense value for two reasons. One, it also helps us to predict the outcome because we now know with the comorbidities, this virus creates a nuisance and havoc. And number two, very important, is about stopping it's more spread through the context wherever the patient has come from the family, from the near and dear ones, and from the community. So there is immense value of diagnostics for sure, and early diagnostics would create a bigger value in day-to-day management. And hence you have asked for a pathogenesis. I will run you through a small one-pager. This talks about the structures of our lung, and I need to share the slide, so I'm sharing the content now, which talks about the structures, the lung as an organ, which is a very vital organ, and obviously the problem which is arising out of COVID being there. We know that lung has a surface area of nearly half the tennis court, and that tennis court area allows us to get oxygen from air which we breathe in and get out the carbon dioxide, which is a metabolite, which is something which is not useful for us. It also helps us in maintaining the pH balance, and this is very important in the patients who have renal diseases, chronic kidney diseases. We know kidney has 5 major functions. One is erythropoiesis, making hemoglobin. Second is renin-angiotensin, which measures and maintains the blood pressure. Third is fluid balance. If fluid is more in body, we throw it out. If it is not, we retain it. Fourth is metabolite and electrolyte balances. And fifth, very important, is the acid-base balance, producing bicarbonate and maintaining the base pH into the blood. But when there is a kidney which is affected either by any disease, maybe viral disease or chronic kidney disease, it reduces the production of bicarbonate because there is lung, which will help by eliminating more carbon dioxide by hyperventilation. So there is a good, important function by lung also to help kidney. The same lung helps failing heart by breathing faster so that it improves the cardiac thoracic emptying and thoracic filling because of negative and positive pressure changes. So lung is very vital. Now this vital organ we know is getting affected by COVID, which has a very, it's sort of an important liking towards lungs and the respiratory system. It starts from the nose, it gets into the throat, it gets into the windpipe trachea and goes and gets inside to the alveolar structure. Alveolus is a functioning unit, what I have mentioned here in the second slide set. Alveolus is surrounded by the capillaries. The capillaries pick up oxygen, give oxygen, pick up oxygen and give away carbon dioxide. And it also maintains good constant blood flow between the heart and the lung. Now, when this alveolus is getting filled in by an invader, and take right now the invader is what? Is COVID or any viral infection. What does it do is, it starts thickening the alveolar and capillary interface. Alveolus gets filled and the capillary and alveolar interface, which is a very thin sort of strainer, which gets affected. And when this starts getting affected, our body has to clean it off. Assume that lung is a strainer, like we make tea, chai banane ki chalni. When there is chai ka bhuka, sort of any kind of material which is remaining in the strainer, we try to clean it by putting it down, tap, tap, tap. Same way there is coughing, which helps us to clear airways. It tells us that there is something inside the airways and inside the pulmonary parenchyma. The moment these alveoli start getting filled up by COVID or any viruses, we start getting breathing difficulty. Because we need at least 600 to 750 ml of air with every breath to meet with 10 liters of requirement. And when there is a disease, the requirement goes up, the lung has to breathe faster. So there is rapid breathing. When there is inflammation inside, there is obviously a pain. The dollar, the calor, and the rubor. So there is going to be redness, there is going to be pain, and there is going to be temperature which is rising. So there is going to be fever. With lung beating faster, breathing faster, every one beat breathing of lung, heart has to beat for 4 times. That is the synchrony. So if my lung is beating at the rate, breathing at the rate of 30, my heart will start beating at the rate of 120. So that is called as rapid breathing tachycardia, because heart has to pull in more blood, which is not bringing more oxygen because the lung tissue is getting affected. Why I'm telling this is, if we catch here, there is a chance of recovery and getting back to the normal function. This is the time we want our lab tests to tell us that yes, there is a possibility of COVID. The reason being, COVID has a unique behavior. In some of the patients, it remains silent for 7 days, 8 days, and suddenly starts throwing the storm of the cytokines. And in some of the patients who are very young, who are very much immune competent and potent, they start throwing storms very quickly. They are called as the quick stormers. So we get some of the patients who are quick stormers, some of the patients who are elderly, who have immune suppression, who have diabetes, who have liver kidney corrupt. In that case, they would storm later. So that is where the diagnostics would make a bigger impact on day-to-day management and outcome. Now, in case if we miss at that time of acute lung injury, then comes acute respiratory insufficiency, or what we are talking about, the SARI. This is the stage at which patients come into the hospital. They come with heavy breathing, they come with continuous coughing, they get into failure, so they have a red frothy sputum. They have sometimes sweating and giddiness because of low oxygen, and cyanosis, they will be there on the nails will start getting bluish. The reason we are talking about this is the time where most of the alveoli would start getting filled, and the capillaries also would start getting clogged, which is called as microvascular thrombosis. This is the behavior COVID has acquired uniquely, and that is the reason when we see the autopsy findings of COVID patients, there is huge thrombus load in the microcapillaries and the smaller blood vessels. So the patients behave as an ARDS with pneumonia, and they also behave like pulmonary thromboembolism. So it's a two pathology. So these two pathologies, if can be picked up at the earliest time of acute lung injury with diagnostics, the treatment also can be modulated accordingly, which would be the treatment of surviving the patient. Unfortunately, if we have missed at that time, then comes the ARDS, and we know that the outcome of ARDS is poor because it is not only the alveolus, but it is the capillaries which are also getting filled in. So these ARDS with alveolar shadow and having capillary thrombosis leads to low oxygen, high carbon dioxide, loss of sensorium. We need to put them on ventilator, and we know that the risk of death is very, very high, especially when there is age which is more than 60, and there are comorbidities. Somebody who has been treated for cancer, somebody who has been on long-term steroids, somebody who is malnourished, having poor nutrition. These all factors would add on to mortality. So the pathogenesis starts from few hours in a normal lung to a few days maximum to get into an irreversible lung injury. So if I have a lung which is normal, if I catch it at ALI or acute lung injury, I'll be able to get back to normal functioning lung. If I get into the stage of acute respiratory insufficiency, it would happen that probably I may get back to normal in some of the cases if I have been treated well and earlier, but I would live with some dent on the lung, which is called as structural lung damage, which would come up because of healing of that viral infection in the lung. And then comes in ARDS, and if that is an ARDS, like in the left picture, the bus is probably missed. If at all lucky enough to come out, it would be definitely a grace of divine, not only the treatment and our own immunity. This is what is the whole journey of lung, from a normal lung to an irreversible injury in COVID-19. And the lab test would be able to pick up at the earliest phase when lung starts earliest throwing sign. So single breath test less than 30. Difficulty on going to bathroom or going to routine walk, or difficulty in climbing up 5 or 10 stairs, which I was doing otherwise, having bad cough, that would be the sign wherein I would want my COVID testing done. So that is where I am now stopping, pausing for others to contribute and come out with questions.
Sure. That's nice way of explaining it. It actually, most of the people would have understood what exactly happens when you get those symptoms and they aggravate. So coming to Dr. Sandeep Shah, sir, we would like to understand from you being the one of the authorized pathology laboratory which can do COVID testing. So, can you throw some light on what are those requirements for such a lab to be prepared to handle COVID-19 testing? And also, what are the challenges you face as a diagnostic lab to run this testing? For example, there are issues with availability of kits, or there may be validation issues. So, can you throw some light on what are the requirements of such a lab as well as what challenges you face?
See the real basically the real-time PCR and there's basically RT-PCR, reverse transcript real-time PCR. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So RT-PCR when we talk about it, and whenever we talk about a RNA virus, there is a specific requirement for the laboratory. So the first thing when we talk about the any real-time PCR, there are mainly three steps in carrying out the test. Dr. Gorangvi has already described about it. That the first thing is extraction of the RNA from the sample. This is the most dangerous part because at that particular moment there are some aerosols can move in the atmosphere. But according to me, the only important part when you open the sample to take out the sample or the viral transport medium, that is the only area where we have to be very careful. So the biosafety cabinet or the BSL level 2 laboratory is must. Second thing is that whatever that particularly from the extraction area, there are two different places. One is the area is a room and second one is a biosafety cabinet. All the biosafety cabinet all the biosafety cabinet should be all whenever we throws all the air out of in the atmosphere, it should be thoroughly filtered by mainly the HEPA 2 filter. And nowadays the few biosafety where we are also working that the air should be heated also at 178 degrees centigrade before it will disperse it in the atmosphere. So it will not have any viral particles. Second thing is that the room itself is also should have a biosafety level 2, means it should maintain the negative pressure of minimum -10, and whenever the room opens, that air should not come inside the laboratory. Second thing is that air also should be thrown out with the after heating at the 178 degrees centigrade. That is the first requirement in the extraction area. Second requirement is basically template addition. So that room also should have to have a minus a negative pressure. So air should be thrown out after heating at 178 degrees centigrade because that is another place where this RNA virus will be open up. It will not produce an infection, but at that particular moment, whatever the aerosols forms, it will admix in the laboratory environment, and because of that positive, sometimes that internal control or the samples will give the false positive because of the availability of the aerosols which will admix in the sample. Third one is a basically master mix room, and we should always have to have a class 100 room with the positive pressure because there you are storing all your primers, probes, and all the PCR material. So that should not because it has to be positive. So the edge cannot enter in that room because all these three rooms are associated to each other. All these two rooms are associated with the pass box, and the pass box should have to have minimum two door on both sides. So once the one door is open, and I think this all the pharmaceutical company people will be aware about it, that what is the I'm talking about the pass box. Now this is a requirement of the environment. The second thing is that as I told you, biosafety cabinet. Third thing is a very well calibrated pipetting system, which is very important. Either you should have to have automation or you should have manual one. Second one is the extraction. Extraction, you can do it manually also, or you can do it with automation. Like we are working with the three different companies automation. The one is from the PerkinElmer or from the Roche or from the QIAsymphony or QIAGEN. Like the Roche has got the maximum capacity, which can extract the 96 samples within 1 hour and 10 minutes. where the Kaya Symphony can extract the 24 samples in 1 hour and 20 minutes, and Perkinamine also can extract the 24 samples in 1 hour and 10 minutes. So that's the way. Like we are working in our laboratory with the two Kaya Symphony system, one raw system, and two Perkinamine system. So we can produce it minimum 2,000 tests per day also is possible. So after the extraction, the sample will be passed on to the template addition room, and that template addition room we have a robotic system, or not necessarily everyone should have to have, but I'm just describing the laboratory where you'll have to put this plate of the extracted material, and on one side the probe and primer. So within a 10 minutes, all the probe and primer will be added in the sample, and the tray will be closed. So this is now you have prepared the whole probe and primer mixture with the very extracted RNA of the COVID virus. So now this whole tube, whole plate will be transferred in the real-time PCR. And as I told you that the RNA has to be converted into the DNA. The reason is that RNA does not have a 3 or 5 end. So this reaction cannot start and end at the specific level. So we convert it into template DNA. And after that template DNA, we start trying at the, everyone knows about what is the real-time PCR. That's a basically continuous thermal cycler, which will increase the temperature and decrease the temperature very fast with the help of the Peltier. And also, we have already added a 10 polymerase enzyme. So whenever, once at the high temperature, the DNA 2 chain will be separated. It will be mixed together if at all we have added identified with the primers and the probes. And when it identifies at the 5 end, it will excrete the fluorescent dye or the depolarized fluorescent dye, and that because of the depolarization, it will emit the color, which will be measured by the machine. Now here, when we talk about that the E gene or the S gene or the N gene, nucleocapsid gene or RDRP. So the most important thing is that according to the WHO guideline, we have to have minimum 3 gene or 2 gene. One is the E is required, basically it is meant for the coronavirus family. And the second was specific for coronavirus. Like so multiplexing PCR, like we are using a 4 probe one go. So in one we can identify 4 different color of the probes. So you can identify E gene or S gene, RDRP or ORF1, all 3 together in a one sample. So it is a confirmatory only. So there is nothing like that. If you there are few testing method, you can go with the E gene first. If E gene is positive, then you confirm it. In our case, we confirm straight away that okay, COVID-19 is positive or negative. So this is the one part what we talk about the real-time PCR, and it's very well aware about it. This is a highly sensitive method and specific method, but the limitation is the basically sample. We always know about that the nasal sample or the nasopharyngeal sample, the positivity rate will go up to 70%. The base sample is always a bronchoalveolar lavage bar, where it will give the nearly 93 to 94% positivity. It's a procedure, and all the patients will not go for the procedure. So the best idea is to go for the nasal sample. But in the suspected case, if at all you will get a first sample negative, you should go for the second time. And if you get a second positive, then it confirms. So out of 2 or 3 samples, whichever, if you get a positive, then positive is more important than negative. You can get a false negative, but the false positivity chances are less, except the aerosol, there is a mixture of the aerosols in your sample. So this is the simple thing about this on the real-time PCR. And second one, what we talk about the antibody. Can you like to think about the antibody? It's very important nowadays. When we talk about the antibody, people are using the nuclear capsid and the S protein together. It's a spike protein. Spike protein is very important because it has got the S1 and S2 two different sites, which will attach to ACE receptor, angiotensin converting receptor, and it will attach to it. It binds that receptor. So angiotensin converting enzyme will not act. So there is a sudden fall in the blood pressure because it's a very important part. So nowadays, with the diasorin people, they have come out only with the detection of the antibody for S1 and S2. So if we are able to have it, and they are giving the results in the quantification with the arbitrary units. So if the person is having that antibody is very high, it suggests that it neutralizes the activity of the virus because it binds straight away with the S protein antigen. People are also using the nuclear capsid because it's a glycoprotein which is highly antigenic, and the few kits are available when it's the mixture of the S and the nuclear capsid, but they are the qualitative one. And the DiaSorin is using only S1 and S2 protein, which is the quantitative one. And we can use that plasma if at all we'll get the arbitrary units of 4,000. And then one can use that plasma in a severe cases or severely infected cases as a plasmapheresis therapy. So that is the reason now it is also very important. And the
Yeah.
last point I would like to tell you, whenever you want to ask the patient should go home, we should measure the antibodies against the S1 and S2. If patient has developed, instead of going the final RT-PCR, if patient has developed this antibody, then this patient has developed a very well immunity, and that patient can go to home without any complications. Thank you.
Yeah, in this matter, sir, can you tell us what is the typical turnaround time for the test from the time you get sample to come to the conclusion whether the patient is positive or not?
Real-time PCR, we give the report within 8 hours, and the ICMR also has concluded that one has to submit the report within 8 to 9 hours. If you are not able to submit, then pass on this sample to another laboratory. They can give the faster report. As Dr. Bharti told, it is very important to identify in acute SARI cases or practically in the early phase of the diagnosis. It will be very helpful to the consultant. If you give the report after 2 days, it has no value. So
Sure.
I believe that according to ICMR guideline, one has to submit the report within 8 to 9 hours. That's the one thing. And the second thing for antibody test, now the automation has started. What we got the DiaSorin automation, which can carry out 200 tests in a 1 hour.
Sure. Yeah. So, thank you, Dr. Sandeep. I move on to Dr. Amit. Dr. Amit, you being a radiologist by background, another important tool for this pulmonary infections is radiology. So, can you throw some light on how radiology can be used for diagnosis of COVID-19? And also, another aspect we would like to know from you is you also are running multiple pathology labs. So, I'm sure this pandemic would have impacted the other diagnostic testing business. So, these two aspects, if you can touch upon, that will be good.
Yeah, thank you, Srinivas. Yeah, so talking about radiology, I think radiology has come like a lifesaver in this pandemic times. We kind of, are testing patients since the day one. So the last 30 days, I think we tested a lot of patients by doing, CT scan of chest. So I have a very interesting data to share. I think Dr. Parthiv would be especially interested in this data. So we did around, am I audible properly, Srinivas?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So we did around more than 350 chest CT scans in last 45 days. And we found out, so these CT scans were not referred to us for testing the COVID patients or anything. These were a routine CT scans, or we did a CT scan with a CT scan abdomen or something just to, fulfill the study. What we found out was that there were around 296 patients amongst 350 patients who showed pattern of viral pneumonitis. So what we typically see on a chest CT scan is the ground glass opacity and changes of pneumonitis mostly. And most of the patients, what we saw was these ground glass opacities was present in both the lobes, more affinity towards the basal lobes. So our data, so whatever small study we have, we found out around 296 patients being COVID positive for this. So where we typically mention that it was an atypical viral pneumonitis. Amongst this 296 patients, 121 patients were perfectly asymptomatic. Most of them came to us for diagnosing a renal stone or something like that. 261 patients among these 296 patients, which we followed up, tested negative within first 7 days and positive only after first 7 days. So what was happening is we somehow found that testing on a CT scan was we were earlier than testing on a RT-PCR or something. And very surprisingly, only 50% of the patient was above the age of 60 years. So this is something which was really, surprising for us. Second thing is there are a lot of, talks going about, how about using a chest X-ray on diagnosing COVID-19, and a lot of people are very excited about using AI in chest X-rays. So what we do is whenever we do a CT scan, we kind of do a, scanogram before doing a CT scan, which is very correlative of a chest X-ray. So less than 1% of the patients only we could see some kind of a opacity in cases where we saw a positive COVID patient after doing a CT scan. So I think my opinion is chest X-ray would not play a very big role because there are a lot of things which can be missed on a chest X-ray which was later only seen on a CT scan. So talking about the radiology, I think, yeah, Dr. Pathi.
Please complete. Sorry. Yeah, please complete.
Yeah. So this is, sir, I have almost completed. So this is what I as a radiologist can put some hypothesis with a very short study for 45 days.
That's really correlating with what international journals and what our own experiences are also talking about. I've been mentoring the state of Gujarat from 19th of March, and we have now formed a lot of protocols on how to deal with suspected COVIDs and contacts also. You have correctly mentioned, we are concentrating more on suspected symptomatic normal X-ray. When we send their COVID, if COVID is negative, we subject them for sure to CT scan, because to do CT scan in every walk-in patient is a huge burden, and the CT scan machines and its maintenance and all, you are very well being credible. But those who are highly suspicious patients who fall into the criteria of to be screened for sure for COVID and to go to the end whether he has COVID or not, for them we generally do CT scan. And I agree with your finding that yes, and it is already there. Like COVID, when tested with RT-PCR in the first week, it is 67 to 68% positive with RT-PCR, whereas your CT scan would show 80 to 82% findings would be positive towards typical of COVID in such patients. So that gap of 67 to 68% up to 82%, that 14% gap would definitely make it possible for us to pick up those COVIDs who either are asymptomatic or mild symptomatic like influenza-like illness. And if otherwise would be given freedom to be in the community, would become those, the decapitated rockets which we use in Diwali, Gujarati ma Gandiu rocket ke, and these are asymptomatic or mild symptomatic COVIDs who would give infection to others who are high risk, a pregnant woman or a child or a multi-organ sufferers, and they would add on to the mortality, not these people. So very well said, Dr. Amit. CT scan has huge role in picking up early, especially when there is one gray zone wherein the path lab tests are still not becoming confirmative because the viral load is not so high.
So there are a couple of questions from audience. I'll just take them. So one question says that, again, you just touched upon how effective the pulmonary X-rays would be to find a patient who is responding to the treatment.
Yeah.
That's one.
So
question.
I think, the chest X-ray would be only important if, while you are treating, there is something positive on a chest X-ray, you have some lesion to define on a chest X-ray, and in the progressive scans, you can really compare whether that lesion is becoming smaller or not. But most of the X-rays, as I told you, more than 90% of the X-rays will not show anything in a COVID positive patient.
Just to give a simile, when you start smelling wire is getting heated, that is the time you need to pick up. X-ray is telling you there is already a fire. When X-ray shadows come up on lung, alveoli are filled up in a huge way so that it becomes sufficient enough to reduce oxygenation, sufficient enough to make a patient symptomatic, and stronger enough to make a patient who is having multiple comorbidities to go to that level that patient probably would be in a much more morbid condition. And X-ray, as Dr. Amit Bhai said clearly, has its own value on prognostication and following up. Once a shadow has come up, whether shadows are increasing, whether new shadows are coming up, and especially in COVID, it is happening that the vascular thrombosis, microcapillary thrombosis and moderate size capillary and vessel thrombosis is a bigger issue, wherein classically we find sometimes having classical wedge-shaped opacity with base towards the periphery, which talks about that there is a thrombus formation, which is a much stronger factor for negative outcomes. Same way, we also do get many times bilateral shadows being added on by unilateral dense consolidation when secondary bacterial infection has come in. So these are the kind of things wherein, and third, very important, a COVID patient who is very sick, it is very difficult to shift the patient from an ICU to go for a CT scan, wherein these modalities of portable X-rays also would help us to see the progress of the disease.
Thank you. So there's another question related to testing. Maybe Dr. Sandeep Shah, you can take it. What is the real use of serum antibody test in COVID detection?
The antibody testing will be helpful, as I told you, the neutralizing antibody, when we talk about the S1, this development of the antibody against S1 and S2 receptor. And that will be really helpful, which will straight away tell you that now patient is definitely going out of danger, because that are the main S1 and S2 protein which will attach to this ACE receptor and create all the symptoms. So that is the one thing. Second thing is it an antibody against the nuclear capsid, which will little bit come earlier, but it shows that the body immune reaction has started. And third most important thing is that because there is a slight overlapping of the antibody formation and the viral multiplication. So doesn't mean that if there is a presence of the antibody means that person is not infected. Make it clear, it doesn't mean that the presence of the IgG type of the antibody in the, which will identify and the patient is non-infected. There are the 4 to 5 days gap, the appearance of the antibody and still the patient is infected. That is the one thing. But the very important thing is that we should measure the antibody against the spike protein, which is very important to tell you that patient is responding, patient will not go for the complications, and patient has developed enough immunity to sustain against this virus infection.
So is this only for surveillance purpose, or this is more like?
Yeah, it is surveillance purpose. And I think you must have read the last report from the New York that whatever the number of the cases they found with the real-time PCR, and then they have done the wide study with the kit from the Abbott IgG level, which is a nuclear capsid with a combo of the spike protein. And they found that 2.3 million patients has developed the antibody. It means that those many patients have been infected subacutely, got it positive, and that's the reason they found that the death rate what they were claiming as a 7% is turned out to be a 0.1%. So make it clear, it is a serious infection, but so many patients are, according to me, I think Dr. Parthiv must be agreed with me that over half of the Ahmedabad is going to be positive very soon for this type of the antibody if you start with the antibody testing.
Sure.
If I would use a simile, it is just like we are standing on the sides of the road, like when Modi ji and Trump side were going on their road show, and the road is filled up with dirty water, and a car passes through and it splashes water. Whoever is getting drops of water also would be showing off that yes, I had received the drop of water. This is what we are calculating about the patients affected. Infected, affected, and genuinely clinically significant sufferers is a big gap between the two. We are making a big noise on AB positive or rather PCR positive, but we have to be concentrating more on the clinical cases, which is what is going to be the importance in epidemiological aspect of any disease or pandemic. Agreed, Sandesh bhai, tamari saath. Ahmedabad, yes.
And the second thing that I would like to say that we have also seen the swine flu also. And you must have seen that so many patients have died in the swine flu. Before, we were having a drug against it. Tamiflu was available on those days. It's not like that. Still, we have lost so many patients. So all the comorbid, there are few normal patients also died. But the comorbidity associated with this particular type of the infection, which is a generalized viremia, and there are chances that we may lose few patients for that.
Sure. So there are a few more questions pouring in. So we are like another 10 more minutes. So I'll throw these questions to panelists. I mean, you can choose. So what would be the scenario? How you think the scenario would change going forward? Now the diagnostic tests, diagnostic kits are available. We are well prepared with this lockdown to probably build our capacities for diagnosis. So how you think the scenario will look like in say few months from now and a year from now in terms of number of patients being detected, being treated? Because we see the death rate, especially in Gujarat, is relatively high, but not globally. If you see, we are much better in India. So with this diagnostic help coming up, how the scenario would change?
I can answer that question in a little bit phrase. See, I always try to tell that the police that it is not a question that patient decides that they want to go for the test or not. It is not their privilege. It has to be basically prescribed by a doctor. Nowadays, it's a community spread, I believe that. And slowly, we are developing the herd immunity also. So all the asymptomatic patients should not go for the test. And we are agreeing that asymptomatic patients can spread the disease, but it is already spread. I don't know how many asymptomatic we want to look for that. Better that patients should go for who are really symptomatic, they should go for the test. And I believe that the ICMR is finding out that real clear-cut strategy that symptomatic patients. The only thing is that government of Gujarat says that okay, only hospitalized patients should be investigated. But I believe that we should postpone the disease if you want that if at all patient is having a simple influenza like illness, they should also be tested. Otherwise, they will be converted into the serious patient afterwards. So better that we should do it a little bit early, but asymptomatic patient, there is no need to go for the test.
Sure. So there is another question which is more related to now everybody is focusing on diagnosis for COVID, but over and above, there have been normal pathological testing that have been happening. So I'm sure there is a big impact on the pathological testing business per se, as far as testing other than COVID is concerned. So, Dr. Amit, would you like to throw some light on what the challenges and how things are improving or deteriorating on the business point?
So, if I look at the business aspect, there are five major, uh, areas where we have to focus or where we are seeing a major things to do. One, the first area is the workforce. So, a lot of workforce has been affected by the COVID thing. So, the first and the foremost thing what we are trying to do, or what everyone has to do, is to protect their workforce. Because if they don't have workforce which is protected, it will create a lot of problems in the future for them. So, the first and foremost thing what we are focusing on is workforce. Second thing is the operations and supply chain. So, what we have done is in this COVID testing time, though the samples have gone down to almost 10-20% of the normal workload, we are trying to still maintain the operations and the supply chain. I'll talk about the operations and then the supply chain. In the operations, what we're trying to do is we're trying to divide the people into the teams and define a very strict hygienic working environment for them. For the supply chain, we are anticipating the supply orders and other things, and trying to plan. So initially, before COVID, there was no need of planning anything. There was a plentiful of resources available everywhere. So now we are planning everything at least 15 to 20 days ahead. The third thing which has affected most of the lab businesses is the finance and liquidity. So what has happening is because of the liquidity crisis, there's a lot of pressure on the lab owners. The employees are expecting a right kind of salaries at the right kind of time. The suppliers are expecting money. So I think that is one more area where we all are focusing. There are a lot of banks which are helping in this time. So I think if you're very vigilant, there's a lot of help which is coming from the Indian banks at the right time. Fourth thing is the tax, trade, and the regulatory compliance. So I think there are a lot of advisors who are available right now to advise specifically on the laboratory, tax compliance, and other things. So I think it's a good time to take help from them. The last and the least, which our Prime Minister is also talking about, is the right kind of strategy and branding at this time. So I think there's a whole lot of innovation happening in the strategy and branding at this time. There's a whole lot of shift from say people who are present pan India going very hyper local. They're educating the doctors in the hyper local area, like Sandeep Bhai and Parthiv Bhai said. There's lot of there's lot of things to still gain knowledge for a lot of doctors around who are practicing. So a lot of doctors are not opening the clinics because they are very afraid of corona and thinking that how we will treat the patient. If the government is not doing the testing for all the patients, we will not do the surgeries on the patients and things like that. So I think these are 4 or 5 areas where we typically need to focus during these times.
Sure.
So do I answer your question, Will?
Yeah, very much. So we are having another 4 minutes. So maybe I'll just go for the last round of kind of insights from you. I'll start with Dr. Parthiv.
Yeah.
Now, this pandemic has changed many things in many ways, and every problem has come up with the possibilities and opportunities to improve or to excel, or there are many opportunities which we should capture. So according to you, what are those opportunities? Like, I'm talking on behalf of a big startup enthusiasts and students and many innovators. So what are those opportunities probably you would like to touch upon?
First opportunity, what I see is to improvise on our own self. Let me take it from there and then take it to others. I, as a human being, should be aware of what human body is, how does it function, what are the maintenance required, what are the preventive maintenance is required, and what are the signals to be picked up. If at all a startup can get into that as a simple, easy to understand and easy to follow kind of health portal, that would be, I as a clinician would see to it. Because we see that the patients have lost their life because they have been picked up late with comorbidities. Their comorbidities have not been doing well. Their other diseases have flared up, or rather COVID has flared up the diseases. So pill reminders, investigation reminders, regular home visit reminders, regular investigation, follow-up reminders. These are the things I would like to put it to the pharmacy, grads or those who are startups require. Critical care is what? Not doing extraordinary things routinely. Do your routines with extraordinary understanding and extraordinary sort of involvement. That is critical care. And such critical care, if can be offered by simple to do things, would be a great service to this nation. Thank you so much for having given me this opportunity to talk to you all.
Sure. Thank you so much. I think you need to rush for another call. So thank you for joining us. We'll continue. Dr. Sandeep, if you would like to touch upon the opportunities that are coming forward.
See, always, every problem always comes with an opportunity. If you are able to convert all the problems in opportunity. So I don't know for today, but from tomorrow or day after, what we'll have to think that people will become more health conscious. And like I always consider that nowadays the medical profession, government also has described as it's a business only, because we also have a consumer law. So they have defined it as a business. So this business will grow. We'll have to do more and more specific. And nowadays, because of this particular epidemic or pandemic, government will take care for all the laboratories, I think, proper licensing thing. So the good laboratory will definitely do better now onwards. That's what I believe.
Sure. Dr. Amit, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, so very consistent with what Dr. Sandeep and Dr. Parthiv said. But a very typical observation which I keep on telling people around me, or I would like to invest in a startup where if some startup is doing this particular thing, interests me a lot. So what happened was, the day one when we heard about the lockdown, we didn't know what is going to happen. we suddenly realized that, there is a lot of gap in an organized sector for the last mile delivery. When I was thinking very aloud, and when I was thinking that there's a lot of space in the last mile delivery for everything, from healthcare to supplies, everything. What all I could only think of was that there is only one place, probably only Amuls of the world, who are a organized last mile delivery player. So probably that could have been a good advantage for the government if they could have explored that channel. But then, yeah, anyone who jumps into a last mile delivery kind of a care in healthcare would be a good place to, get started, and a good opportunity there.
Very well said.
Yeah.
Dr. Gaurang, are you there? Yeah, Dr. Gaurang, we would also like to know what research opportunities this pandemic has created. Yeah, Dr. Gaurang, can you hear me? Yeah, can you throw light on what are the opportunities from the research and development point of view this pandemic has brought up?
There are lots of opportunities, right from what we say, creating the masks and other things, the transportation facilities to be created for the logistics, creating new antibodies and new vaccines and all those things. So from small scale status to the large scale, there are lots of opportunities this person is having, and how to tap it up, that is more important.
Sure. Well, with this note, as all the panelists shared, that there have been many opportunities that has come up towards us, and we should exploit the opportunities thrown by this pandemic. And diagnostics sector per se is doing wonderful job. And as Dr. Parthiv said, how critical it becomes to have the right tool for diagnosis, and minimum turnaround time like 8 hours is something a big time from getting sample to confirming the positive case or not. But I think there is a lot of opportunity to have faster diagnostic tools which will help reduce the time between uh, patient getting admitted and getting into the fatal situation. So with this note, I thank you all for joining this webinar today. And one quick request, now you all can like show your videos, switch on your videos, we can have an selfie. Yeah, can you put on your videos? Keep going. We're clicking. That's great. Thank you so much, and good evening to all, and have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.